Hey there, kiddos. This video is called Four Major Problems Part 2. It's an add-on to our original video where we didn't really want to tell you the answers to what happened because we wanted you to be able to debate them a little bit. So here is what happened with George Washington and the foreign affairs issues he was facing during his presidency. Okay, so the first issue that we debated in class and that you debated with your group was the Mississippi River and the fact that Spain controlled the Mississippi River and they wouldn't let us use the river for trade. So what Washington decided to do, rather than try and buy the territory or try to go to war with Spain, is he chose to go the treaty route. And he made a treaty called the Pinckney's Treaty, because it was negotiated by Pinckney. So Spain gave us free navigation on the Mississippi River. And they did so because we were going to help them help them defend the territory against Native American attack and possibly English invasion. Spain hadn't developed their territory very much, so they owned all that land, but there wasn't really a whole lot out there. So we were out there, and we said, "Hey, Spain, you let us use the river, and we'll hook you up with a little free reconnaissance, a little defense, if you will." And believe it or not, that was enough to get Spain to let us use the river. So this was an issue that was easily solved by Washington with the Pinckney's Treaty, at least for the time being. We'll get more about the Mississippi River when we move on to the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, where this will become an issue again. Okay, so there's the United States, Spain, and England, the three countries involved more or less in this treaty. Okay, moving on to the issue of Native Americans and guns, and sort of impressment as well. What Washington does with England is he decides to send a guy named John Jay to England to negotiate a treaty with the English. And what the treaty says is England agrees to leave the frontier trade posts, the outposts out in the western part of our country that they were using to supply Native Americans with weapons. And it also, in exchange, allowed us to open up some trade routes into India for us. So it's going to allow the United States to have more trade with other countries. So obviously you can imagine the North pretty much loves the Jay Treaty. It keeps our relationship with England cohesive and nice, and it increases our trade, which is cool. The issue with one of the big issues with the Jay Treaty, other than the fact that it favors the North, is that it does not solve the issue of impressment. England does not, in anywhere in the Jay Treaty, say that they will stop impressing our sailors, and they continue to do so after the Jay Treaty. So many people in the South, the West, and even the Middle colonies believe that the Jay Treaty was like a slap in the face. It didn't do enough, but the people in the North loved it. So the Jay Treaty was very controversial, but it did keep the peace with England during this time period. All right, moving on here. Here's the map of the trade routes that we will have this area of the country because of the Jay Treaty. And we'll move on now to the issue of Native American attacks on the frontier. And what Washington does with this issue is he decides to go to war with the Native Americans. And they basically whip them up after some hard-fought battles, which were heavily contested. There was eventually a battle, and the Americans won the battle, and they pretty much wiped out the Native Americans, and they forced the Native Americans to sign a treaty which gave up their land in the West. So although it says treaty, this issue is actually solved by war. The Native Americans wouldn't have signed this treaty had they not first been defeated in war. So this actually opens up Ohio and stops some of those Native American attacks that were happening in the Northwest Territory, along with the Jay Treaty, which we talked about before, which stopped England from being in the Ohio Territory. The Treaty of Greenville also protects settlement out west. So those two things sort of help solve that problem. Here's a little picture of a Native American battle, actually a battle that will happen later on in history. Okay, and then finally the issue of France versus England. Washington is very, very steady on this issue. He does not ever waver. He proclaims neutrality. He says we are not going to get involved with a foreign war. We're not going to side with England. We're not going to side with France. We're going to stay neutral on this issue. And that was really, really important to Washington. And he stayed true to this belief throughout his presidency, despite all the different pressures he was facing from the north and from the south. He said, neutral. We do not, at this stage in our country's young life, you do not need to get involved in a foreign war. That would only hurt the country. So, peace. At least they try to have the olive branch here between England and France, and they never get involved in a foreign war while Washington is president. Okay, so that just about does it. Those are the solutions that Washington picked to the foreign affairs problems. You have a treaty with Spain, a treaty with England that actually didn't solve all the problems and was pretty controversial in the Jay Treaty. You have war with the Native Americans with an eventual treaty with them when they forced them to sign the Treaty of Greenville, and neutrality between England and France.